this is gonna take a while. Alright, we're gonna stop that. Okay. I'm gonna preface this recording with two other things other than that intro. The first thing being, I'm at Tex's house right now because he has better internet than me, and Tex and Rick are upstairs, which almost guarantees somebody's gonna be yelling things in the background throughout the course of this. So there's that. The other thing being, I didn't really end up doing one of the sort of suggested things. I totally forgot to tell you, and then I was too far in to really turn back. So sorry about that. As far as I can tell, it meets all the requirements, and in the few areas where it might be a bit different, I can go through that. I'm not going to bother bringing up the whatever the recommendations were, but it's its own thing. So I'm going to start with going through the site itself. So it's actually live up on Heroku here. It's just deploying from a GitHub repository. So this is the site here. It's called Gradient Bucket. This is the homepage. So basically the idea of the site is you store gradient information. So like direction, it's all linear gradients. I didn't have time to implement stuff for radials. Rick is yelling things at me. You can see here using Wappleizer, which is awesome. Using Ant Design, styled components, and React. Obviously the back end is Express and Mongoose. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on in the code as well that I'll kind of run through. Some more stuff there. Yeah, so the front end is all in React, as I said. So it's doing its thing. It's not mobile responsive. I just couldn't spend the time doing CSS for that because I was spending too much time doing other neat things in CSS, like the sweet swinging bucket, which is an animated SVG that I designed and then added the code animations in for it to be animated. When you click on it, yeah, how you like that? And then I've got these two floating buckets here on my homepage, made with love and coffee by Connor Manili. That's a bit of a I don't know. I put that in at the beginning and it stayed. The coffee part is a lot more true than the love part, but whatever. It's a pretty simple site. It basically goes one of two directions. Either you dive right into creating a new one, or you can check out the ones the gradients that already exist that you've already stored. So you can see both of these are both also animated SVGs using CSS animations to do their bobbing and weaving. So we're going to go over here, bam, new gradient. So this is my new gradient creation form. It's a pretty sweet form. Ant Design gives you a lot of really cool things that you can do. There's a crap ton of validation that goes on here, and it's really neat, so I'm going to show off. So for starters, I have a name in. Try to submit that. Nope. It needs all this other information. So all of these fields with these stars behind them, everything ended up being required information. It's a pretty simple data shape. The colors and the direction are actually the nested schema. They're like multiple colors. It was really simple. That's the one I tried to find ways to make it more interesting while still going with this idea that I really wanted to do, but there just wasn't really more. Like, I'm already padding the data set more than it needs to be with like use case and stuff. But so anyway, we can go through. So we'll give it a name. We'll call it Black Tornado. The creator, like, call it Bernie Sanders. It's not a great name, man. And it's for, it's a gradient for starting socialist. Had to think about that. Revolutions. Cool. So again, if I try to create, it's like still telling me, hey, I need to finish fleshing that out. For my description, I'm just going to grab some arbitrary large body of text. Let's do the Iliad. This is kind of my go-to for a lot of stuff. It's just, just stuffing the Iliad and things. Grab the first couple paragraphs here. Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles. Gradient bucket. Throw that in, so you'll see it resizes text area, all that good shit. So that can contain just like an arbitrarily large amount of things. Really interesting stuff is going on in these bottom two. So you'll notice this one's already validating that it needs at least 2 valid hex codes. So I can throw in the first one here. Actually, I can show you an example of a not valid hex code. Hey, look at that. It's still not valid. Still not valid. So it knows what hex codes should look like, and it actually is storing each of those as an individual tag that's going to be broken up into an array, which is really, really cool. So it can start with 000, which is a valid hex code, and FFF, which are also all valid hex codes. And then I'm going to select a direction for it to go. Bam, and it's actually going to auto-generate what that gradient is going to look like right there, and it'll live change anytime I change one of these values. So I can go 000F, bam, there we go. So it's a linear gradient going from left to right. It's, wait a minute. No, it's going from right to left. Oh, Jesus Christ. I don't know if you can hear that on the capture, but they're causing inappropriate noises. So we're gonna go with this really ugly gradient. I'm gonna flip it around so it's top ways, but it's just, it doesn't look great, but whatever. And I'm gonna hit my create gradient button. Bam, and there it is, Black Tornado. That is in the database now. These are some examples of the other ones. These are all just kind of the gradients I have kicking around. A bit of a weird styling thing there, so that it's just extended these boxes out, because this one has a longer description. I'll have to go back in and fix that at some point, but no big deal. These are all just getting mapped out and are arranged with CSS Grid, which is pretty freaking cool. So you can see here we have all these ones, and my pointer is blowing up when I hover over them. Why is it doing that, you might ask? Well, it's because if I click on it, boop, gradient CSS copy to clipboard, and I can actually, you can see this right here, bam, linear gradient to left, hash code. That's valid CSS. You could drop that right in a CSS file, and it would generate that exact gradient for you, which is pretty fucking cool, I think. So you can do that for any of them. It's going to be different every time. It's going to be accurate to each one. You can see it's generating the correct linear gradient CSS depending on which one you click on, which is pretty fucking fun, I think. So then we've got our show. Just brings it up again. It's just showing off each tag as the color that it is. This is non-editable but selectable text fields. Same with this thing here. I don't think you can, yeah, you can scale it up and down, but to a limit. And the direction, it's just the direction. So, and then I can click outside to close it or wherever. Pretty slick. That one's hard to look at. This was a questionable design decision to make this the background, because it really works for some gradients and it really doesn't for others. But I don't know. I still like it. I'm still happy with it. It does make some stuff disappear. So I don't know. I'll have to do some thinking on that and maybe make the text like I don't know, like multiply overlay or something. I don't know. So yeah, so that's the sort of the show and the copy, and this is, you know, this is our list. When you hit the edit button here, it pops up basically, you know, a version of the form that's also going to let you live edit it. So it changes right there in the background, which is again really super cool. All that kind of stuff. So I'm going to change this to sky. I'm going to change it to pine sky. Is that inappropriate? I feel like that's a euphemism for something, but I don't know. I'm going to update that. Bam. It's called Pie in the Sky now. And if we look at it, it's created by Texas instead of Tex. You can refresh the page. Oh. That's interesting. What? Don't really know. What that was. We'll take a look at that in the code when we get into the code. I have a suspicion that might just be something about my React router is set up weird. We will take a look. I think that might also be something that only happens on the Heroku version, so that might just be an issue with the deploy. I don't know. We'll take a look at that as we move on. Final thing about the site, the delete. Bam. Ask for confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete this? You know, wherever you hit the delete, it'll pop up. If I hit no, it doesn't delete. And then if I hit yes, boop, it's gone. I guess if I refresh the page, it'll probably break. But if I just navigate back to here, go back to the site, it's gone. Like it's not in the DB anymore, which is pretty cool. Okay. So that's the site. That's all the CRUD in action. You can see all the things happening, which is pretty neat. So let's take a look at the code. So here's my code here. The whole project structure is completely different than what we did in class. So obviously I'm running a React front end, but I'm actually packaging everything with Parcel, and actually serving the front end website through the server, which might have something to do with that weird issue I was having. So I set it up so that in development I can actually run yarn dev, and it'll use concurrently to npm run my server and npm run my client simultaneously. So I'm actually going to close these tabs here. Yeah, I have to try to remember what the name of that song was. I'm going to close these tabs here. I'm going to pull up my terminal. Sorry, I'm using my trackpad, so it's a little difficult. CD yarn dev, and so this will spin up both the front and back end simultaneously, and sort of do a watch on both. You can see up here in the code that the server script is just no demoning the server index file, and the client script is noting this dev server JS. I'm gonna go into that in just a sec. No, actually, I guess I'm going to go into that now. So dev server is really simple. It actually, what it does is it spins up a really simple Express server that's just setting up a proxy, so that in development I didn't have to write localhost 3000 on all of my shit. Because when it's live on the server, it just does its it's all one route because it's all being served through the backend. But in development, it's two different things. So you can see down here, this is all started up, fired up on localhost 1234, backend's on 3000, and it's created a proxy right there. So that's all this does, and it's just using the bundler, Parcel bundler as a middleware to bundle it up, and then it just does its shit. So it just lets me. Just some quality of life things that I built into the package for development purposes. I've got my no daemon setup file in there as well. My ESLint, my Babel RC, because that's all Parcel needs to do its job as a Babel RC, which is super cool. Like it just does the thing. It packages. It creates a cache. You can see this spun up in 54 seconds, which is I think the longest I've ever seen it. There's some efficiency things that I need to change in here. So like right now, it's not like tree shaking and stuff properly, because I didn't quite figure that out, or didn't realize it wasn't until too late. So I need to do some trimming of packages that are getting included that don't need to. But anyway, so you can see this is built. So if I bring this up here, whoop. Oh. So there we go. There's the site. It's doing its thing. And if I go here, I refresh this page. I don't get that. Yeah, I don't get that issue on the local locally running version. So that's interesting. So I'll have to look into that. Yeah, so as far as project setup, I think that's the gist of it. There's only one package.json. Everything else is contained and just built within the same thing. I don't think I would do that again, because I think that's part of the reason why my packages are kind of slower than they should be, because it's building too much into the actual dependencies instead of the dev dependencies, especially ant-d. That's right now it's just bringing in the entire design library, and there's some stuff I can do to get that down a bit to only what I'm using, but anyway, don't save. So on the back end, I just called my sort of main thing index. Because of the way I'm running all of this stuff, this is a really nice small Express server startup. Like, it just is really easy. Basically all it's doing is it's connecting up its Mongoose, it's filling out its body parser, so it's got its Express JSON and all this stuff. I didn't have those for a while, and that was a huge problem because I wasn't able to read anything from my body because I didn't realize that I hadn't put them in because I rolled all this myself. So that was a mistake. This is just a example thing that I was using. So you can see right here, here's the magic line that's just statically serving dist, which is the built version of the front end that Parcel's building for me when I run my actual yarn start and yarn build. Otherwise, all of this really speaks for itself. The DB is connected there. My routes are connected there with the URL gradients API. Routes is coming from this file here. Basically exactly what we did in class. No surprises here. Get, post, all to what you would expect. The controller, again, pretty similar to what you expect. I do have a little test guy here that's still floating around, but otherwise this is all exactly what it is. There are a few things that I changed from the examples that we did in class, just like brought it in line with Mongoose's sort of way of doing things, like delete. I didn't do delete the way we had it set up. I just did it sort of using the delete one. I think update is different than what it was too. But otherwise, it's all just straight up Mongoose doing its thing. So it finds them all, turns them, spits them back, setting its status codes. Same here. The create, you can see, like I said, this is the super simple sort of schema I went with. It's all just pulling it out of body. I wrapped it all in an object called values because that seemed like a good idea at the time, but it doesn't really matter. I didn't do that for create because I just didn't need to. I realized I just hadn't, I forgot that I hadn't cleaned that out, but no big. Yeah, so it doesn't really do, it's a pure API, right? It's not doing anything because it's all connecting to the React front end, right? There's no EJS, there's no routing, it's all pretty clean. Obviously the sort of fanciness is here in the model. So I did roll some validation, so it's actually doing gradient validators. So it's validating basically the same thing on the front end, which you saw, but it's also doing it on the back end, just sort of in case. So it's validating that there's at least 2 codes, and then there's a custom validator written to match every code against this regex here, which is a hash. Hex code, Jesus, a hex code regex, right? Just totally what you would expect. So it just matches all codes. It's also checking just to see that code is not undefined and that code is a string. And if it's not a string, it's just doing a ternary and spitting back, or if it doesn't match, rather, it's just doing this and spitting back a false. Oh, sorry, no. If it's not a string, it spits back a false, and this evaluates true or false on its own. Those are plugged in here. I did include defaults for this, so kind of the validation was moot. Ultimately, I think realistically I should probably just remove the default and let people sort of actually define something. Same with direction, though. I did include some more advanced validation direction. Just it compares against enum, just looking for left, right, top, bottom as one of its values. Again, I included a default. Again, I probably don't need to. The other ones are just so simple because it's all just, whatever crap you want to write in there, I'm fine with. So they're just strings, they're just required, nothing super crazy there, and then we have our connecting of our subdocument right there. So that's pretty much it for the back end. Nothing really magical happening in the back end, other than fun learning about how APIs work, because that's always been a bit confusing to me, and now I feel like I really get it because I wrote one. Yay! So here's our front end. So we'll pop into to index here. I wrote in the right front end. Yeah, I did. Index is super simple. It's bringing in my CSS, my anti-CSS, and it's also bringing in this global style here. Global style is just a font importer, so it's just bringing in some fonts from Google API. I'm using styled components. If you've never seen styled components, if you do React stuff, I highly recommend styled components. You'll see it in action in just a minute. But I'm probably dragging on a bit here, so I'm going to run through a bit more quickly. This is my app. Oh, hey, look at that. I don't need Axios in there anymore. I should clean that out. It's all going inside a layout, which is just sort of just a standard container component from Ant Design. It's got its routes here all chalked up. I used just exact routes for all of my views. Then obviously I only ended up actually having 3 views with one that's like sort of a specialized transition view. So kind of 4, but it's actually just 3. So I've got my home, I've got my list, and I've got my new. I thought maybe the reason I was getting that weird refresh issue was that I hadn't exacted my routes, but they are. So I don't know. I'll have to look at that. If you have any suggestions, Sean, let me know. Okay, so obviously the first thing it's going to route to here is home, so let's drop into home. Project structure wise, so assets are just sort of the SVGs that I was using. Global are just little things that didn't really have anywhere else to go, that are kind of just needed to be used all over the place, or in the case of global style, to be injected globally once. Pages are my actual pages, so the JSX files here are the pages themselves, and then each directory is its sort of like the stuff that only that page needed to know. So it's styles, any subcomponents that were exclusive, things like that, and components holds universal subcomponents, so footer, navigation, and the form template, because I use the form template. The form for creation, the form for show, and the form for edit were actually all the same form, just sort of like dynamically changing depending on use case, which I will show off. So here's my home. It's pretty... I would have liked to clean it up a bit. There's obviously a shit ton of imports because I was playing around with parallaxing from React Spring, which gives me that really cool animation on the home page, but it ends up being a pretty dense component. So this is the actual thing itself. So it's just got to scroll down, which uses a ref to parallax. You can see the refs being created right there. And it just basically pops the scroll to, and then it just has the part of the page it's scrolling to. Function, I guess, of parallax. And there's the sort of the components. So this is kind of like the way it works is like this is the first page, this is my splash page, and this is like my main page. So they're actually just 2 components in the same page that get a parallax scrolling between the 2. And then when I handle scroll in Splash, so up in Splash here, I've got my background and all these parallax layers and everything have different offsets and speeds to give that kind of like differential movement. Everything's moving differently. This is something really annoying my Prettier has been doing, that it keeps on like shifting text. Okay, of course it's not going to do it now. Fucking embarrassing me. Oh, you can see, yeah, Parcel's hot module reloading there, which is pretty cool. And it compiles a lot faster once it's run than Webpack does, because it creates a cache. So that's pretty cool that it takes like 1.28 milliseconds. Anyway, so this does that shit. This invokes the onClick, which shifts everything down and brings all this into view. And this is just importing some stuff. There's an inline style there, just because I didn't want to make a whole styling component for this, which I will show off in a second, because I'm sure, as you've noticed, I'm importing all of these components from something called Home Styles. So Home Styles, this is styled components in action. Styled components is a beauty, because basically what it lets you do is it lets you wrap styles around components that are written inside of a tag template literal that lets you write just straight up CSS. Like, my editor knows this is CSS. It gives me CSS auto completion, and it does my linting and everything for CSS, and then I can still inject props and functions and conditionals and all kinds of stuff. So like, this is the thing that's sort of optionally rendering, changing the background, doing all kinds of cool stuff. I actually don't know. Oh yeah, it was so I only had to use one background component that just changed depending on what the offset was. So these all basically become styled versions of whatever component they originally were. So this becomes a styled parallax layer, this becomes a styled H1, this becomes a styled horizontal rule, etc, etc, etc. You can do keyframes and everything and all this shit. It's very cool. I really like the workflow of styled components, because it gives you the full power of CSS plus a bit, because it allows for nesting, it allows for some Sass-like functionality, and it also allows you to just put JavaScript in your code, right? Calculated random animation delay so that they're out of step, all kinds of cool stuff. No, I don't want to save. So I won't dive into any of the other stylings too much, other than just to show you how that's working. Once we're here, I've got my routes, which I'm actually handling my routes programmatically by using... Where am I wrapping with router? History push, handle history. Oh, am I wrapping each of these? Yeah, there we go, with router. So I'm mapping my main component with router, so that it has access to the history item, and then it's pushing history down to handle route, or I guess up to handle route, and then handle route is just pushing the new location onto history. I just did that because I didn't want to fuck with trying to put a link. Sorry, Rick. Because I didn't want to try dealing with wrapping my floating buckets with links, like React router links. So I just made it a function instead. That's probably breaking some kind of rule, but fuck it. So dive into the new real quick. New is pretty simple here, because as I said, it's just bringing in form template and dropping it in. It's giving it actions, so handle color change, handle direction change, which do specific things here. Oh, I really shouldn't have all these console logs. I thought I got rid of those. The handle submit is just using Axios. The forms implementation in Ant Design is really cool, as I mentioned earlier. But it's very dense and complex. You'll see a bit of that when I take a quick look at the form, but basically you generate the form, you put a component into that form, and then it adds properties and stuff. Like, it basically injects properties and stuff that allow you to do, like, trigger the validation on that form, and actually like take the values and ship them off. So you can see this is where that values object in my backend came from, and it's just posting to where it's supposed to go, and then it reroutes programmatically as well. So that's that. Yeah, Tex is making a good point. I'm gonna move along here. This is gonna be long. That's what she said. Yikes. No, it isn't. No. Gradient list has a lot of methods in it, or a lot of functions, I guess. So the state, selected, gradients, show, edit mode, color. This thing really got pretty dense. Is this not being used? Why are you yelling at me? Oh, should be placed after componented mount. It should be placed after componented mount. Thank you, ESLint. You're so helpful. What a helpful linter you are. Fucking chode. Oh my god. What do you want? What do you want now? Yeah. Jesus. Most of these are just set state. Handle show opens up my show, sets my colors. So this is all just about those little show doohickeys. These guys. Boop. So that all these colors are set and can change dynamically when you edit and everything. Cancel just closes it and turns off edit mode, just in case it was turned on. Turns off show. Update list is what actually does my get, that updates my list of gradients, whereas my handle delete obviously here is posting to my delete with the ID that it's getting passed in, etc, etc. Handle edit, doing the same kind of stuff. Yeah, it's selecting my gradient selected. Oh yeah. Sorry. Handle edit is handling like the open of the edit mode, because it's all the same component, just in a different mode. And then handle submit is what actually posts off the edited stuff, which is kind of fun. And then my render. I don't really like this pattern, but this is something that ESLint just ESLint happens to enforce, and so I kind of went with it. I don't love having everything destructured out all the time at the top here, and you can even see that it yells at me in some spots because I didn't do that, because I think it just makes a really messy render method, but whatever. I've got my navigation being brought in here. I had to put my navigations actually in on the pages because of me getting fancy on the home page. I couldn't just wrap it around the routes like you normally would. There's, again, probably better ways of doing it, but this is how I've done it. This conditionally renders the model if there are, basically if the gradient specs aren't undefined. So if that information exists, then you are allowed to render the model, which is only visible if the state of show is true. There were confirm and OK buttons that I've hidden here just using inline styles. Colors and direction are obviously being forwarded to show model, which is another styled component thing in there. Here, so it's using those to generate its gradient. And then there's another form template, which has edit mode turned on, and if edit mode is turned on, show mode is not turned on. This is different than the other show. Naming conventions and some of this needs some work, apparently. And this is just mapping out the cards. Okay. There's a lot of stuff in here. Navigation, really quick, is exactly what you would expect it to be. I programmatically read it again because, I don't know, I like doing that. It's easier to just make existing buttons and styles work than try to restyle the links, the React Router links, I think, anyway. But that's not super declarative or whatever, so I probably shouldn't do that. Form template is the last thing I'm going to run through because it is hella complicated, because forms in React are hella complicated. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's just too much. All I'm going to show off is like one form item. So the handle submit is passed down from its parent to do whatever it needs to do. So this is basically the way it works. So if it's not in show mode, render a input. So down here in this iffy, so it's rendering this input with a field decorator attached to it, which basically says the data type is going to be named name or creator or whatever. It has validation rules, so it's required. In this case, required is the only validation rule there. And its initial value is, if it's in edit mode, it's the name of the current gradient. Otherwise, if it's not in edit mode, it's just nothing. There's no initial value. So you can see how this one form is actually all of the forms in my site, just being changed depending on what's being passed into it. And then, so if it's not in show mode, it renders a read-only input, which I probably could have done it in a different way. I just realized, but anyway, so that's how it does it. It's not a terrible pattern. It's at least consistent, and each thing is grouped into a form item, which handles my layout and everything. Really quick. I'm sorry this is so long. Here, validation, it does pattern matching against all of the things, so that's how it's doing its front-end validation. In this case, it's just basically looking for 2 or more of these patterns. It does the same kind of stuff with the initial values and everything. Select options. I mean, it's a select. You can't really change what's there, so it is. Again, this is driving me nuts. I haven't figured out how to fix that, but okay. Yeah. So that's everything. That's all the things. That's probably not even all the things. I'll be honest, but it's all the important stuff, and a bit more than that too. Jesus. So it's pretty complicated. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think the code needs some refactoring. I think I can clean some things up. I think I can abstract some of the generation of stuff. But there you go. Fucking only took, what, like 40 minutes have I been talking? Jesus. Alright, I'm done.